You're not welcome here anymore, Dad. Either you serve him, or you leave. Those words hit me like a punch straight to the chest. My own daughter, Emily, standing in the doorway of the house I helped build, telling me to leave as if I were a stranger. I froze, staring at her polished nails, the sparkle in her ring catching the sunlight from the bay window, and the smug look on her husband, Ryan's face. My home, my rules, gone. Just like that. I'm Robert Mason, 62, born and raised in Cedarville, Ohio, a small town where everyone knows everyone, and secrets rarely stay buried. I'd spent decades building a life from scratch. My hardware store that barely survived recessions, the little diner on Main Street that I turned into a community staple, and my home, a modest but warm brick house on Maple Drive. Everything I had worked for, sacrificed for. Yet here I was, being told that none of it mattered anymore. Emily was always bright, sharp, a dreamer. I supported her every step. College tuition, first car, even the down payment for her townhouse in Columbus. But somewhere along the way, her life with Ryan had created a new hierarchy. Him at the top, her in tow, and me, the irrelevant relic, from a past they wanted to erase. The smell of fresh-baked bread from the kitchen, a smell that had been part of our family dinners for decades, mocked me. I wanted to scream, to throw the dishes off the counter, to remind them who had put a roof over their heads. But I didn't. I swallowed hard, forcing a calm that felt like it belonged to a man twice my age. Emily's voice was smooth, rehearsed, like a line from some terrible daytime drama. Dad, you need to understand. This is our home now. Ryan and I, we make the decisions. I looked around the living room, at the photographs on the mantel. Emily at 5, her first piano recital, family Christmases, all the moments I had cherished. And suddenly, I realized they thought they could erase me, not just physically, but emotionally. They wanted to take my dignity, my legacy, everything I had built, and hand it to a man who didn't even know the first thing about sacrifice. I clenched my fists, not out of anger, at least not yet, but out of a quiet, simmering resolve. Because I knew something they didn't. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, they were all still in my name. Legally, I still had power. And I intended to use it. Before I could say another word, Emily's expression softened for a second. "We just want what's best for the family," she said, though her eyes betrayed the cruelty behind her tone. And Ryan, he just smirked. That smirk. The one that says, "I own everything now. It took everything I had not to respond with fire." I took a deep breath, feeling the old pulse of determination that had carried me through bankruptcies, the closing of my hardware store, and that terrible winter when the diner almost shut down. I was still here. I was still Robert Mason. And no one was going to erase that. I stepped back, adjusting my tie that had seen far better days, and looked at them one last time. "I'll leave," I said quietly, "but don't think this is the end. You've just awakened something you don't understand." They didn't respond. Emily turned on her heel, Ryan following like a shadow. The front door clicked behind them, leaving me standing in the silence of my own house, the sunlight slanting through the blinds, dust motes dancing like tiny specters of memory. I walked over to the desk in the study, ran my hands over the stack of documents, mortgage papers, property deeds, bank statements, every legal leverage I had. And I smiled, quietly. They had underestimated me. They always did. This wasn't just a fight over a house. It was about respect, dignity, and proving to my daughter and her husband that you can't build your empire on the ruins of someone else's life. And I was ready to make them pay, without lifting a hand in rage. But little did I know. The first move I was about to make would unravel a secret Emily had been hiding for years. And it wasn't just about the house anymore. You think just because you write the checks, you can tell me what to do? I muttered under my breath, pacing the study. The house was silent, but the tension hung heavy, like the Ohio humidity in July. The smell of old wood and dust filled the room, grounding me in memories of better times before Emily and Ryan decided. My opinions didn't matter. The next morning, I drove down to Cedarville Bank, the one I'd been with for over 30 years. I wasn't there to argue or beg or explain. I was there to understand exactly how much control I still had. The teller, a young woman named Jayce, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Mason, I didn't expect to see you here," she said, smiling. "Everything okay?" I forced a polite smile. "I need to review my accounts," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "All of them. Full access." Jayce hesitated, glancing at her supervisor, but nodded and led me to a private office. As she pulled up the statements, I felt that familiar rush, the cold, rational realization that I still held the keys to their so-called empire. Ryan might have been running the house, but legally he had no say over the mortgages, the investments, or even the minor rental property I still owned downtown. I leaned back in the chair, folding my hands. "Interesting," I murmured, almost to myself. I could see it all now, the leverage I had been ignoring. The thought sent a chill down my spine, but in a good way. Later that day, I drove past Emily's townhouse. Ryan's car was in the driveway, expensive, gleaming like a trophy. I noticed a couple of their neighbors outside, whispering and pointing in my direction. Small towns thrived on gossip, and Cedarville was no exception. I could feel the tide turning if I played my cards right. When I got home, I found a note pinned to my door. Emily had written it herself. "Dad, you need to respect our space. We won't tolerate interference. Stay out of our lives." Her handwriting was neat, precise, cruel. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Interference? She doesn't even realize who she's dealing with. That evening, dinner was a tense affair at the local diner. I sat in my usual booth, watching the regulars chat, the smell of fried bacon and eggs hanging in the air. A few old friends noticed my tension, but wisely didn't comment. I needed a plan, not sympathy. Later, I overheard some gossip from the waitress, Carol, who had been Emily's friend in high school. "Did you hear?" she whispered. "Emily and Ryan are planning to sell the house on Maple Drive. They want to move closer to Columbus. They think they can get rid of your dad without a second thought." That did it. My blood ran cold, but my mind sharpened. Sell the house? Move on as if I'd never existed? No, not if I had anything to say about it. I spent the night in the study, poring over the deeds, mortgages, and small business contracts. Every figure, every clause, every loophole. By midnight, I had mapped out a strategy. Not impulsive, not emotional. Calm, precise, ruthless if necessary, but always legally untouchable. I could stop the sale, control the finances, and maybe, just maybe, show Emily and Ryan exactly what they were dealing with. But first, I had to confirm one more detail. Emily had been hiding something, a set of transactions that didn't add up. If I could expose them at the right moment, everything they thought they had would crumble. As I looked at the stack of paperwork on the desk, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about teaching my daughter that betrayal had consequences. And deep down, I knew the perfect opportunity would come soon. Perhaps at a family gathering. Perhaps when they least expected it. Because small towns have ears everywhere, and secrets rarely stay buried. As I closed the ledger and turned off the lamp, I couldn't shake the feeling that the first domino was about to fall. But I also knew this. Once I moved, there would be no going back. This wasn't a warning. It was the calm before the storm. And little did I know, Emily had her own secret. One that, if revealed too soon, could ruin everything. I sat in the study, the soft hum of the ceiling fan cutting through the silence. For years, I had been the quiet observer, the one who took the blows, paid the bills, and watched my family grow without complaint. But now, something inside me had shifted. Calmly, methodically, I began planning. This wasn't about rage. It was about reclaiming what was mine, and proving to Emily and Ryan that betrayal always comes with a price. I pulled the deeds from the bottom drawer, flipping through each page. Maple Drive, the small rental property downtown, the investment account I had opened in Emily's name years ago, which she thought she controlled. Every asset, every document, every piece of leverage was mine, and I would use it before making any moves. I decided to consult my lawyer, Frank Delaney. Frank had been my confidant through the diner bankruptcy and the hardware store closure. He knew the law, the loopholes, and most importantly, he knew me. "Frank," I said as we sat, in his office downtown, "they think they can just push me aside. Emily, Ryan. They've got no clue what they're dealing with." Frank leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Robert, you have the legal advantage. The house is in your name. All the accounts are under your oversight. And the contracts you have with the rental properties give you total authority. But you have to move carefully. Any hint of personal vendetta could complicate things." I nodded. That was fine. Careful was my middle name now. "I don't want to humiliate them in court," I said. "I want them to see the truth. Publicly, if possible. But it has to be controlled, calculated." Frank smiled faintly. "Then you're ready. And I think the first step is subtle. You don't confront them directly. Yet. You let the evidence speak. Review the transactions Emily's been hiding. There are irregularities. Her husband has been moving funds around without your knowledge. Small-town banks notice these things. You can use that." I left his office with a renewed sense of purpose. I could see it now, the web of deceit Emily and Ryan had spun. They believed they were untouchable, that their smirks and polished appearances shielded them from consequences. But they had forgotten one thing. The quiet man, the father they tried to erase, had eyes sharper than theirs, and patience far longer. Back at the house, I sat at the desk and began tracing every transaction. Every small withdrawal, every suspicious transfer from the accounts I had funded, every bill Ryan had quietly pushed through. There it was, a pattern. Emily and Ryan were siphoning money from the Maple Drive house accounts to fund their new lifestyle in Columbus, counting on me being too old, too soft, too polite to notice. I smiled, not a grin of malice, but of quiet satisfaction. This was leverage, pure and simple. And the beauty of it was, they didn't even suspect that I knew. The next morning, I called a meeting with the Cedarville bank manager, Mrs. Latham. I requested a full transaction history for all accounts connected to the house and the rental property. She hesitated at first. This was unusual, but I reminded her that I was the sole legal owner. By lunchtime, the files were in my hands. I pored over them for hours. Each page told a story of greed, deception, and betrayal. Emily had been masking small withdrawals as personal expenses. Ryan had been using the rental income to pad their lifestyle. They had assumed that their careful planning would keep me in the dark forever. But they had underestimated the quiet strength of a man who had survived real loss and hardship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked out the window at Maple Drive. My home, the one they had tried to claim, stood silently. And I knew what I had to do. The plan was simple. Expose the truth at the perfect moment, reclaim control legally, and make sure everyone in town knew the stakes of betrayal. But the challenge was this: timing. One wrong move, and I would only look like a bitter old man lashing out. I needed the perfect stage. A family gathering, a social event, or perhaps even the reading of a will. Somewhere public, somewhere undeniable, somewhere that would make them realize just how far they had overstepped. And then I remembered something Frank had said. Let the evidence speak. With that in mind, I began organizing every document, every transaction, and every letter. By the next week, I would be ready to make my first calculated move. I would not just reclaim my home, I would reclaim my dignity. But as I looked at the pile of papers on my desk, a chill ran down my spine. Emily had a secret I hadn't uncovered, yet something bigger than the small financial manipulations. And if I wasn't careful, it could derail everything. The Saturday air in Cedarville was thick with humidity and the faint smell of freshly cut grass. The perfect day for a family gathering, or, in my case, the perfect stage. Emily had invited me under the guise of a casual brunch at Maple Drive. She didn't know I wasn't coming just to eat. I came with every piece of evidence meticulously organized, every document ready to reveal the truth. I parked the car across the street, giving myself a moment to take it all in. The house looked picture perfect. The lawn manicured, the front porch decorated with hanging baskets of petunias. Emily waved from the doorway, a practiced smile plastered across her face, Ryan standing proudly beside her. But I noticed something subtle. Nervous energy beneath the surface, perhaps a premonition of what was coming. As I stepped onto the porch, Emily's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Dad! You made it!" she chirped, overcompensating. Come in, come in. We've got mimosas, bagels, and, oh, your favorite blueberry pancakes." I nodded politely, ignoring the sarcasm I sensed beneath her words. "Thank you," I said softly, setting my briefcase down beside the dining table. "I'll just make myself comfortable." The brunch started as expected. Laughter, small talk, polite nods from distant relatives. But beneath it, I could feel the tension rising, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I had chosen my moment carefully. Mid-brunch, when everyone was relaxed, distracted, and least expecting the storm that was about to hit. "Before we eat," I said, clearing my throat, "I have something I'd like to share. Something important." Emily shot me a look, a mix of irritation and panic. "Dad, maybe not now," but I held up a hand. "It can't wait." I opened the briefcase and carefully laid out the documents. Bank statements, transaction logs, copies of the property deeds. "These," I began, my voice calm but firm, "show the financial activity tied to this house and the rental property downtown. All of it is still legally under my name. And it shows something troubling." Ryan's smirk faltered. Emily's fingers gripped her napkin. The room went quiet. I began pointing to the irregular transactions, explaining each withdrawal and transfer. These funds were moved without my authorization. Personal expenses disguised as property costs. And here, I said, pulling out a printout of the rental income, you've been redirecting income meant for the maintenance and mortgage of this house. Whispers spread through the room. Even a few of the neighbors Emily had invited to the Fai brunch leaned in, sensing the drama. Emily stammered, "Dad, it's not." I cut her off gently but firmly. "It's all here. The truth doesn't lie. And what's more, the bank confirms that any attempt to sell this house without my consent would be illegal." Ryan tried to interject, his voice rising. "Robert, you can't just—" I held up a hand. Calm. Collected. "I can, because it's still mine. And it's about more than the house. It's about respect, integrity, and consequences." The tension in the room was palpable. Emily's face turned red, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Neighbors exchanged shocked glances. The brunch, which had been planned as a cheerful family event, had transformed into a courtroom of truth, and I was both the judge and the witness. Then I revealed the final piece, a document Emily had tried to hide a series of transfers that suggested not just carelessness, but deliberate misrepresentation to hide their financial activity. Gasps filled the room. I watched as their carefully crafted image of perfection crumbled, bit by bit. Emily's voice was trembling now. "Dad, I shook my head gently. "No excuses. You chose to betray me, to ignore the sacrifices I made for you. And now, the truth is out." For a moment, silence. Then, slowly, neighbors started murmuring, the whispers growing louder. The reality of their actions had just been exposed, and Cedarville would never forget it. And as I closed my briefcase, the satisfaction was calm, quiet, complete. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't struck anyone. I had simply let the facts speak. But I also knew this wasn't the end. Emily and Ryan's humiliation was only the beginning. The final act, where they would lose everything they had tried to claim, and I would reclaim my dignity fully, was yet to come. The morning after the brunch, Cedarville felt different. I drove through town, the familiar streets lined with brick, buildings, diners, and the occasional pickup truck, and I realized everyone knew. Whispers followed me, nods of respect from neighbors who had seen the unraveling of Emily and Ryan's carefully constructed image. Small towns never forget a scandal, especially one rooted in betrayal. Emily and Ryan didn't speak to me for days. The house on Maple Drive remained quiet, the curtains drawn tightly against the morning sun. But I had no rush. Revenge, I had learned, was a patient art. I let the law handle the rest. Frank called me one afternoon, his voice calm but triumphant. "Robert, the bank has frozen all unauthorized transfers. The mortgage is under review. They can't touch the rental property without your consent, and any attempt to challenge your authority will go directly to court." I leaned back in my chair, sipping a mug of coffee from my favorite Cedarville diner mug, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Emily and Ryan had underestimated the quiet strength of a man who had weathered life's storms, and now they would see the consequences. By the end of the week, the first dominoes fell. Emily's friends began distancing themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal. Ryan received calls from the contractor and landlord associations, questioning the irregular financial activity. The Maple Drive house remained firmly under my control. The rental property, also untouchable. I walked through the house one evening, sunlight filtering through the blinds, dust motes floating like tiny memories. Each room held a story. Emily's first piano recital, family Thanksgiving dinners, quiet nights reading by the fireplace. I had reclaimed more than property. I had reclaimed my dignity, my peace. Then came the ultimate poetic justice. Emily had attempted to sell some of her inherited furniture to cover a personal debt. But the buyer, aware of the public scandal, refused, citing legal uncertainty. Ryan's attempts to open a new credit line in Cedarville were denied once the financial irregularities surfaced in local records. The empire they had imagined was crumbling around them, piece by piece, while I remained untouched. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The law, the town, and the quiet truth had done the work. For me, what remained was silence, dignity, and the satisfaction of knowing justice had been served without ever raising my voice in anger. That evening, I sat on the front porch, the same one Emily had stood on when she told me to leave. The wind carried, the scent of jasmine and freshly mown grass. I closed my eyes, breathing in the calm. My home was mine again, but more importantly, my peace was restored. I thought of the lessons learned. Betrayal cuts deep, but patience, knowledge, and integrity can turn the tide. Emily and Ryan would rebuild, of course, but the town would remember. And they would never forget the quiet father who refused to be erased. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I smiled. I had lost nothing but gained everything that truly mattered. Respect, dignity, and peace. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories, I whispered, the voice calm, reflective, and full of quiet triumph. And in the stillness of Maple Drive, the house stood proud, a testament to resilience, patience, and poetic justice.